Okay, so let's unpack this. It is Saturday, January 31st, 2026. And if you've been anywhere near the financial news this week, you know something huge just happened.
Huge is an understatement.
Right. After nearly 20 years of this diplomatic will they, won't they, which honestly had more drama than a bad soap opera, India and the European Union have finally done it. They've shaken hands on a free trade agreement.
It really is a historic moment. And just to put a pin in how big this is, the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, she didn't mince words. She called it the mother of all deals.
Mother of all deals, that's
Yeah,
that's a heavy title. But when you look at the raw numbers, it kind of tracks, doesn't it?
it absolutely does. We are talking about a trade zone covering 2 billion people,
2 billion.
which is roughly, a quarter of the entire global GDP, just in this one agreement.
So our mission for this deep dive is to get past those flashy headlines, the handshake photos. We need to figure out why now. Why, after dragging their feet since 2007, did they suddenly sprint to the finish line?
Exactly. And who are the real winners? That's what I want to know.
Yes. Is it the person buying a car? The patient who needs medicine? And we have to talk about this massive green catch that seems to be hidden in the fine print.
Absolutely. There is so much to scrutinize. On the surface, it's a win-win.
Mm.
But the details, they're incredibly complex.
Okay, so let's start there. The why. Why now? These talks were dead in the water for years. What changed?
Well, to put it simply, the world gets a lot more dangerous. This isn't just about economics anymore. It's about what experts are calling defensive strategic autonomy.
Defensive strategic autonomy. That sounds like a military term, not a trade term.
In 2026, they're kind of the same thing. Look,
Yeah.
both India and the EU looked at the global chessboard and realized they needed an insurance policy.
An insurance policy against what?
Against two things, really.
Yeah.
First, the return of Donald Trump to the White House.
The Trump factor. Can't escape it.
You can't. His administration's doubling down on America first. There's a real fear of, sudden 10%, 20% tariffs if the U.S. becomes unreliable.
Then India and Europe need to open their doors to each other. A hedge.
Exactly. It's a hedge. And the second factor is, of course, China.
Yeah.
The EU has been very loud about de-risking.
We hear de-risking all the time, but what does that actually mean here? Are they pulling out?
Not pulling out completely, no. It's more like diversifying. It's
Wow.
really just polite diplomatic speak for we are way too dependent on China and it's starting to scare us.
So they need a new manufacturing hub.
They need a new, reliable manufacturing hub. And they are betting big that India is that hub, the whole China plus one strategy.
Right. And for India, this lines up with their Viksit Bharat goal to be a developed nation by 2047. They need European tech to fuel that.
It's the perfect match, really. Europe brings the capital and technology. India brings the scale and the workforce.
Okay, so it's a marriage of convenience. Let's get into the actual goods, the stuff people can touch and buy. The headline numbers are pretty staggering.
They are. The EU has committed to eliminating duties on 99.5% of all Indian goods.
99.5%. That's basically everything. It sounds like a completely open border for Indian product.
Pretty much. And it's a huge deal for labor-intensive sectors in India. I'm talking textiles, leather, gems. These industries have been getting hammered by competitors like Bangladesh and Vietnam who had better access.
So this levels the playing field for them.
It does. Now, on the flip side, India is cutting duties on about 96.6% of EU goods. But, and this is a big but, they're doing it slowly, over 7 to 10 years.
Okay, that makes sense. A gradual phase in. But let's talk about the one thing everyone is asking me about, cars. Does this mean I can finally afford a BMW in Mumbai?
Huh. Okay, I hate to burst the bubble, but let's manage expectations. It's not a floodgate of cheap luxury cars. It's more surgical.
Surgical how?
Okay, so right now, if you import a fully built car, a CBU, you're paying up to 110% in tariffs.
It's insane. You're buying one car for yourself and one for the government.
Right. Well, under this deal, that tariff drops to 10%.
Whoa, wait. 110 down to 10%. That sounds like a floodgate to me.
It does, until you read the fine print. That 10% rate only applies to a strict quota, 250,000 vehicles per year. And crucially, only for high-end cars.
What's high end?
Anything priced above 35,000 euros.
Okay, so we are talking about your entry-level Mercedes, Audis, Porsches, not the mass market cars that most people drive.
Exactly. This is designed to not threaten the core market of companies like Maruti or Hyundai. The Indian auto giants Tata and Mahindra, they're actually okay with this because the deal does something else that's really clever. It completely eliminates tariffs on what are called CKD kits.
Okay, CBU, CKD. Explain CKD for us.
Completely knocked down kits, basically boxes of parts, the engine, the chassis, everything you need to build the car locally.
Ah, like giant Lego sets.
Yeah.
So they want the European companies to build the cars in India.
Precise story. The goal isn't just selling cars, it's forcing localization. It means more factories, more jobs, more tech transfer. It's smart.
Very smart. Okay, what about the other big luxury import? Alcohol. Are wine lovers celebrating?
They have every reason to. Duties on wine are being slashed from 150% down to between 20 and 30%.
That is a massive drop. That changes a bottle from a special occasion to a regular Friday night thing.
It does. And spirits like Scotch whiskey are capped at 40%. Even things like European chocolate and pasta are going to zero duty.
Sounds great for my pantry, but I imagine local producers are a little nervous. We'll get to them. First, let's pivot to something more critical: healthcare.
This is, I think, the most important win for India in this entire deal, and the one people understand the least.
Because we're the pharmacy of the world, right? But this was a huge sticking point in the talks.
It was the biggest conflict. Europe's big pharma companies wanted much stricter IP rules, specifically something called data exclusivity.
Okay, break that down. Data exclusivity sounds kind of harmless.
It's not. Think of it this way. A big company invents a drug. They do years of clinical trials to prove it's safe.
Yeah.
That trial data is the data. Data exclusivity would mean that even after the patent on the drug expires, a generic company in India couldn't use that original safety data to get their version approved.
So they'd have to do all the expensive, time-consuming trials all over again themselves.
Exactly, which would delay cheap generics by years. It's a way to extend a monopoly.
And India said no.
India stood its ground and won. The final deal is TRIPS aligned, not TRIPS plus.
So it follows the standard world trade rules, but no extra restrictions.
Correct. Indian generic companies can launch the moment a patent expires. And that's critical for affordable medicine, not just in India, but globally.
And what about medical devices? We make great drugs, but we import most of the machines.
We do. About 80% of high-end gear, MRI, CT scanners is imported, a lot from Europe. The tariffs on those machines are dropping from 27.5% all the way to zero.
That has to lower healthcare costs. I mean, setting up a new diagnostic center in a smaller city just got a lot cheaper.
That's the hope, that it trickles down to the patient. And there's one more piece. A strategic trade corridor for APIs.
The raw ingredients for the drugs.
Yes, the stuff we currently buy from China. This whole deal is about securing that supply chain, moving it from China to India.
Okay, so that's goods. What about people? Services. Did India get more access for its professionals, the IT workers, the engineers?
It did. This isn't just about moving boxes, it's about moving talent. There's new access for Indian professionals to work in the EU, up to 3 years for some categories.
That's a big deal for the IT sector.
Huge. But there's a financial win here that's buried in the text. It's called the Double Contribution Convention.
Okay, that sounds incredibly boring. Why should I care?
You should care because it saves Indian companies and workers an estimated 4,000 crore rupees.
Okay, now I'm listening. How?
It's simple. Before, if you were an Indian worker on a short-term project in, say, Germany, you had to pay into their social security system, but you'd never get any benefits from it.
And you were still paying into your own system back in India.
A double tax. This deal gets rid of that. You only pay where you belong. It makes Indian service exports that much more competitive.
Okay, so far, this is sounding almost too good to be true. Cheaper machines, protected generics, easier visas. Which brings me to that green catch I mentioned. This is where the plot thickens, isn't it?
This is where it gets very, very complicated. This is the first FTA to fully integrate something called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBM.
CBM.
The carbon tax. The carbon tax. And it's the new gatekeeper of global trade. Starting this year, the EU will charge a tax on imports based on how much carbon was emitted to make them.
And that hits things like steel and aluminum, which in India are made with a lot of coal.
Exactly. We're not making steel with green hydrogen yet. The estimates are that this tax could be anywhere from 9% to as high as 22% of the value of the goods.
Wait, hold on. Do the math for me. If India gets a tariff cut of, say, 10%, but then the EU slaps on a 20% carbon tax, we're actually worse off.
That is the nightmare scenario, that the carbon tax completely wipes out any gains from the tariff cuts. It's giving with one hand and taking away with the other.
So did India just sign a deal that kills its own steel industry?
Not necessarily. They built in some safeguards. First, a most favored nation clause. If the U.S. or anyone else gets a break on a carbon tax, India gets the same break automatically.
Okay, that's a good safety net.
Second, the EU has pledged 500 million euros to a fund to help Indian industry decarbonize.
Is that a lot? It sounds like a drop in the ocean for transition industry.
It is a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
But perhaps most importantly, there are talks to let India's own domestic carbon credits count towards the EU tax.
So you don't pay the tax twice.
Right. It's a way to avoid penalizing developing economies. But make no mistake, this is forcing modernization. It's adapt or die for these industries.
Now, speaking of people who are not happy, we have to talk about the critics. There's been significant pushback, especially from farmers.
Right. The Samyuk Kisan Morcha, the SKM, has been extremely vocal. They've called this an economic colonization blueprint.
That's strong language. What's the specific fear?
They're worried about dairy and agriculture. The fear is that heavily subsidized European products, olive oil, fruit juices, dairy, will flood the Indian market at prices that small Indian farmers just can't compete with.
The classic David versus Goliath argument.
A Goliath who gets billions in government funding. And they also point to a double standard. They say the EU uses these strict sanitary rules to block Indian mangoes or grapes.
I remember the mango ban.
Exactly. But at the same time, India has agreed to lower its standards to let European food in. They feel it's a completely unequal exchange.
And they're planning a general strike over this.
Yes, for February 12th.
Yeah.
So while the diplomats are shaking hands, the reality on the ground in places like Punjab is, well, it's a lot more volatile.
The classic tension of any trade deal. So when does all this actually start?
Oh, not for a while. This is a bureaucratic beast. First, the entire agreement has to be translated into all 24 official languages of the EU.
24 languages.
Every single one. That alone takes months. Then it has to be ratified by the European Parliament, which can be tricky.
So a realistic timeline.
We're probably looking at mid-2027, maybe early 2028, before this is fully implemented.
So if we zoom out, what's the final takeaway? We started by calling this the mother of all deals.
And it is. Look, the world is fragmenting into blocks. A U.S. block, a China block. What India and the EU have done here is build a massive bridge between their two blocks.
A geopolitical statement. We don't want to be forced to choose a side.
Exactly. But here's the thought I'll leave you with. We've built this amazing bridge, but we've also built a new kind of wall at the end of it. CBAM, the carbon tax.
A green wall.
A green wall. So the real question is, will this deal truly integrate our economies? Or will that carbon tax just create a greener, more exclusive VIP club that developing nations can't get into?
Is it integration, or is it just the gentrification of global trade? That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
It really is.
Well, while you mull that over and maybe think about whether that cheaper bottle of wine is worth the potential cost to a local farmer, sign off.
There's always a trade-off.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.